We will call this meeting to order of the Water Commission Thursday, October 26th.
Recording in progress.
16, 2025. There we go. Okay, so can we have the roll call?
Yes, Commissioner Snyder. Here. Commissioner Young.
Here.
Commissioner Cooney.
Here.
Vice Chair Davis.
Here.
Chair Keller.
Here.
Councilmember Sneddon. All right.
Okay. Any changes to the agenda?
Chair Keller, there are no changes to the agenda.
Thank you very much. Is there any general public comment at this point?
Chair Keller, we have no speakers for general public comment.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to move on to the consent calendar, and I'm going to first, we can go to the approval of the minutes for August 21st. I wasn't here, so I will abstain from approving them. But I do want to mention that they were so clear, so detailed, so amazing, congratulations, that I didn't have to be at the meeting. I basically read them, I understood everything that happened. So really, really great minutes, fantastic. So thank you very much.
I second that, and I'll make the motion to approve item 1.
Thank you very much. And we'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Snyder?
Yes.
Did we have a second? I'm sorry. Did we?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Snyder?
Yes.
Commissioner Young?
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney?
Yes.
Vice Chair Davis?
Yes.
And Chair Keller?
Abstain?
Motion
Okay,
carries.
thank you. And then,
I was going to make the motion on item 2.
well, let's have some questions first, just a couple of questions.
ahead.
So I have some questions on the increase on call data integration. So it's basically an increase to a contract that was issued in 2023, and it's supposed to run until 2028. And the question is, we already run through 70%, so I want to understand why we had already spent 70%. Are we getting a lot more calls than we expected? So just a little bit of info on that.
Absolutely. Chair Keller, members of the commission, Philip Maldonado, acting principal engineer.
Thank you.
Here at the city. Yes, both of these contracts are with integrators that are both our water distribution and water treatment crews and wastewater collections and wastewater treatment crews use fairly frequently. And the intent of the on-call nature of the contract is services as needed for the control systems throughout our systems. And so, yeah, we have been using them fairly regularly, and we do see some anticipated kind of maintenance needs coming up in the coming years, which is why we are planning on increasing it. But
And then that increase, how was that calculated? How did you come up with the numbers that you said you recommended?
working with the crews and really looking at what their expected needs are for the coming years remaining on this contract. And so it's not that we will actually use those, it's kind of just having that authority because those the funds are not encumbered until we actually identify the specific work need that is required.
Okay, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? Have we kind of have a motion now?
Motion to approve item 2.
Second.
Commissioner Snyder?
Yes.
Commissioner Young?
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney?
Yes.
Vice Chair Davis?
Yes.
Chair Keller?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So next we have the administrative items, and the first one will be the water agency's update. So if we can have that, thank you.
Good morning, Chair Keller, Water Commissioners. My name is Dakota Corey, and I'm the Water Supply and Services Manager. We try to provide these updates on our 3 water agency JPAs quarterly. And typically, I just provide the update in a staff report form, but there's a couple of significant items with 2 of our JPAs this quarter that I wanted to go ahead and make a presentation out of the updates this time around. So moving on to our first agency, we'll talk about the Cachuma Operations and Maintenance Board, referred to as COAM. COAM is a joint powers agency that was formed in 1956. They operate, repair, maintain all Cachuma project facilities except for Bradbury Dam, which the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation maintained control of. There's 4 member agencies in COAM, including the City, Goleta Water District, Montecito Water District, and Carpinteria Valley Water District. And COAM is essentially responsible for the diversion of water from Lake Cachuma to those COAM member agencies via the Tecolote Tunnel and the South Coast Conduit, which carries water all the way down to Carpinteria. So in April 2025, COAM and U.S. Bureau of Reclamation staff decided to inspect the portion of the South Coast Conduit that travels within the Sheffield Tunnel. And the Sheffield Tunnel is a 6,100 foot, 6-foot diameter concrete tunnel that the South Coast Conduit is housed within. This portion of the South Coast Conduit is 30 inches in diameter, and it was formed in 12-foot segments, and those segments are joined together by 503 steel bands with double gaskets coated in mortar. And so you can imagine at the point in which those concrete segments come together, there could be some potential issues. This is a pipeline that is over 70 years old, and actually has been performing very well, but it was good to get eyes on it with this inspection in the tunnel, and they did find some significant issues. So 15% of those 503 joints had severe mortar cracks, or the steel bands were cracked or otherwise compromised. And I tried to include some pictures here. This is a grading system of the different deficiencies that they found in the pipeline. So in the upper left-hand picture, you see a type 1, so a pipe that's in good condition. And then working down the left-hand column, it goes 1 through 3, and then 4 through 6 on the right-hand column. And so the deficiencies get progressively worse as you travel through. And so that 15%, those were deficiencies that were rated type 4 or 4 through 6, 4 or worse. The Sheffield Tunnel doesn't have any redundancy, and so it's a significant concern that if there was any damage to the South Coast Conduit within the tunnel, it could cause water supply disruptions to both Montecito Water District and Carpinteria Valley Water District. Also, because of the confined space nature of the tunnel, there's significant access challenges for repair work, and there could be environmental damage if there was an uncontrolled release of chlorinated water from the South Coast Conduit into local creeks. So this is obviously a pretty significant maintenance concern for COME, and they're developing a concerted, phased approach to addressing these issues. So they are making repair of these deficiencies a top priority. And the first thing that they're doing is they're just monitoring tunnel intrusion to make sure that the problem doesn't get any worse. So they have baseline understanding of any water that's currently seeping out of the South Coast Conduit into the tunnel. They're monitoring that flow to make sure that it doesn't increase, which would indicate that a leak is getting worse. They want to do a video inspection of the inside of the tunnel. So far they've only been able to lay eyes on the outside of the tunnel, and they want to get an idea what the condition looks like from the inside. They plan on doing that this winter. And then in the meantime, they're looking at different technology options to repair the pipeline. A large diameter pipe like this can be difficult to repair. And so there's several different technologies that they're exploring. Right now, it seems like what's floating to the top is a continuous internal semi-structural pipeline liner. And at their September board meeting, the COME board members approved to make improvements to the Sheffield control station, which would replace 2 large diameter valves. Those valves are over 70 years old, and they don't currently seal properly. And so making improvements at those valves would allow the staff to both isolate sections of the South Coast Conduit, which would reduce the risk of a catastrophic damage, and allow staff to perform camera inspections, emergency repairs, or pipelining within that closed space environment. And that work to replace the valves is going to be performed this winter along with the video inspection.
I just wanted to note the city's role in this is kind of an interesting one. So to kind of orient you, this tunnel goes from the Sheffield pump station, which is located near the Santa Barbara Tennis Club, right there off of 92, all the way to Parma Park. Okay, so and it comes out in Parma Park. So we have we've already started conversation with Parks because the tunnel at one time had a road to that. Would you call it the east portal? I guess that road is, since we don't access it on freeway, basically has disappeared, and so it would be reestablishing a temporary road. COME would be obviously doing this, but helping to facilitate how that would work for the construction. And then, of course, the city plays this pivotal role along the South Coast as kind of I don't want to call it the broker of water in many ways. And so should this tunnel go out, I think there would be a lot of pressure on the city to try and figure out how to at least pass some level of health and safety water down to Montecito and Carpinteria during the interim outage. So we're looking at that and seeing how we might be able to support. Certainly, we can't move the volume of water that the South Coast Conduit moves, but exploring how we might be able to move some level of water to maintain basic health and safety downstream. So those are some of the key roles that the city is invested in, despite this being a COMB project.
I had a question on the current status of the pipe. So is the concern just that there could be a major break and it would compromise it, or is there like a amount of water loss right now that's a concern?
The water loss from the pipeline currently isn't very significant. The concern is that there could be some sort of catastrophic failure.
Yeah, got it. And what would be the downtime for repair? Who knows?
I don't have a good guess.
I think
on
that's part of the problem. Is you can see in the photo here, it gives you a good sense of it. There's not a lot of room to work in there.
Yeah.
So it would be very complicated trying to get equipment in there depending on the failure type. But that is something that COMA's focused on, which is how can we isolate this? How can we make a repair? And then the window to do this is ideally in the springtime. So when water demands are at their lowest, because at some point the city's going to need to probably provide some basic water into the South Coast Conduit somewhere in the Barker Pass area, while this section gets isolated. So we're working kind of through how we would do that under a planned condition. Yeah.
Thank you.
How is COMB funded, and how when something like this happens, how do they figure out who pays for what?
So COMB is funded through member agency contributions, and the way that they are approaching this project, the board action in September to work on the 2 large diameter valves, it wasn't in the immediate budget for this fiscal year, but it was a project a couple of years out, and so the board took action to move that project to a higher priority and deprioritize essentially other projects. So it still fits it within the current budget. The greater project of lining the pipeline could be additional funding than what's currently projected within COMB's budget. They do adopt their budgets annually. However, COMB is also very, very good at rounding up grant funding. They're very active in that, and they've done a really nice job with past projects. So I would have faith that they could continue to do that.
Question. So, with what frequency had COMB been inspecting this conduit?
My understanding is this is the first inspection inside the tunnel in a long time. In fact, I was going to point out the pictures here. They attempted to inspect the tunnel a couple of months prior to April 2025, and the problem is safety of staff that are in the tunnel. They needed continuous communication with those staff, and so the first time they got together with Bureau of Reclamation staff, COMB staff, they went in the tunnel and they lost communication, and so they had to have the staff come out because it was unsafe for them to continue through the tunnel. They improved their communication technology, which is what's in some of these pictures here, and were able to complete the full inspection.
So my question is really as to whether they had inspection and maintenance of the conduit kind of on their plate this whole time, going back many, many years. Why now did they decide to budget it? Did something happen? Did they just kind of think, gee, maybe we should look at it?
I think it's just been one of those areas they've been trying to get into. Of course, COMA's been really active. There's a lot of stuff that they've been trying to address. And this has been an area it's been on their radar. They've been wanting to get in here, but it's been a lot of issues around safety. How do you do it safely? Because the Bureau is also going to participate as well. And so I think that was probably more of the hangups of getting in here. 20 years ago, I don't think there was as many safety protocols and they could go through the tunnel. But as those changes, OSHA changes have come about, they've been struggling with, okay, how do we do this in compliance with all of the recent OSHA changes? And they finally got the communication, which is complicated to figure out because this tunnel does have a bend in it. So being able to line of sight communication around a bend, I think they finally were able to get in there and do this. But it's probably been a decade or two since we've had someone go through this.
Thank you.
Councilmember Sneddon?
Thank you. I just want to add to that that the city does have representation on COMB. I'm currently the chair of COMB, and we do have voting status and have followed this along, and it was unanimously approved to continue with this work. Yeah.
Okay, so in addition to the Sheffield Tunnel, COMB is a small but very mighty agency, and they accomplish a lot. They do regular facility maintenance on all of their facilities, everything from the intake tower at Lake Cachuma all the way through the South Coast Conduit. They work hand in hand with reclamation staff in support of the federal consultation process with the National Marine Fisheries Service. And more importantly, right now, implementation of the state water rights order. So that has to do with how much water is released from Bradbury Dam in support of Steelhead downstream. They also recently served as the lead for the co-member agencies on the reclamation mandated contract compliance review. So this is something that, because we have a contract with the Bureau of Reclamation, every 5 years we do a review of our contract, making sure that we're following all the rules and we're only sending the water where it needs to go and to the right types of users. So COMB took the lead on that, which was really helpful to us member agencies. They do really excellent monitoring and modeling of Lake Cachuma elevation, so they're always anticipating when we might need to install the emergency pumping barges, and also water quality so that we can best utilize the resources in Lake Cachuma. They also do, they have a whole fisheries arm that does monitoring and reporting related to the endangered Southern California steelhead. And then finally, they also have an oak tree restoration program. And this program will actually sunset at the end of 2025. It's been very successful, and they're going to reach their specific mitigation target of just over 4,000 alive and self-sustaining oak trees at the end of that program. So if there's no more questions, we'll move on to our next agency, which is the Central Coast Water Authority, or CCWA. CCWA is another joint powers agency that was formed in 1991 to deliver state water to its 8 member agencies, one of which is the city. And CCWA is one of 29 state water project contractors. So they own and operate a water treatment plant, which is Colonial Pass, and pipelines that deliver water from the state water project to project participants in both Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo counties. The big news coming out of CCWA, and this is big, is that the lawsuit initiated in June 2021 with the purpose of ensuring that the state water project was being managed efficiently between the CCWA, the member agencies, and the Santa Barbara County Flood Control and Water Conservation District has been settled. So this lawsuit was initially initiated when there was some amendments to the state water project contract, and the county has always been the contract holder for the water rights on the state water project, with CCWA basically owning and operating and maintaining the project. And when those when that management contract passed, the county put some interesting stipulations on how CCWA member agencies could utilize the water when the management, the changes to the contract were meant to increase flexibility, and that flexibility was kind of held tightly with the county a little bit. So this lawsuit was initiated. The settlement has several important key terms. The most important and most exciting to the member agencies is that the state water contract is going to be assigned to CCWA, and the county will no longer be the holder of that contract. And my understanding, both the county and CCWA have signed off on that, and they were just awaiting final signatures with DWR. The CCWA and member agencies have decided to dismiss the litigation with prejudice. CCWA is going to pay the county $5.8 million. The city's share of that would be just over $445,000, and likely will be spread out over a 10-year period. And then finally, CCWA granted the county the option to reacquire up to 1,700 acre-feet per year of suspended Table A water if CCWA pursues a project to reactivate or reacquire any of that suspended Table A water. And I don't know, it's been a little while since we've talked about suspended Table A, so I'll give you a quick definition of that. when the contract between the county and DWR was originally established for the State Water Project, the Table A, or the total amount of water contracted for, was 57,700 acre feet. And then in 1981, the county and DWR executed an amendment to that contract, and it reduced the Table A amount from 57,700 acre feet to 45,486 acre feet. The difference between those two values is the suspended Table A water. So that's 12,214 acre feet of water. But then in 1987, there was another settlement agreement and compromise where DWR and the county decided that the county had the right to reacquire all or a portion of that suspended Table A water at a time of their choosing. And so there's a lot of value in that 12,000 acre feet of water. And so CCWA has been working for a long time to determine whether or not they would like to take on those water rights. But if not, it could potentially be sold back to other state water contractors. It's a chunk of water that has value for the agencies. There's a lot more details and history related to this. I do have our city attorney, John Doimus, on Zoom if there's any sort of more legal related questions on this item. But we can pause here and take any questions if you have any.
We believe the street value of that 12,000 suspended Table A is somewhere in the $10 million range.
So I'm just curious why CCWA is going to pay the county any money.
So the simple explanation, there's a lot of history, but the residents within Santa Barbara County all paid in a portion of originally acquiring this contract for the 57,700 acre feet, and not everybody in the county has access to that water. They're not served by a CCWA member agency, and so it's a way to sort of pay back the county residents that didn't really get benefit from the state water project within the county.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was going to be my question too, but I was also wondering, so the suspended Table A water, that the value of that 12,000 acre feet, I know that in wet years, we've had trouble kind of figuring out what to do with our water, and in dry years, our allocation is limited. And so the real value of that water seems like it would likely be lower, because in the years where it's needed, it would be unavailable. So I guess I'm wondering how that, like what that suspended Table A water, like when do we actually ever get it?
Yeah, I would say, it has different values to different agencies. As you know, there's a lot of GSAs that have been formed. They are looking for water to shore up their, and this is great if you have a groundwater basin or agricultural operation in which you can kind of, in wet years, take that water and in dry years pull your local groundwater. This water has a lot of value to them. For us, I don't know that additional water, we've weighed in on this before, that we weren't interested in the additional, but to others, there could be some value to that. And when there is no new water out there, this has an opportunity to increase, or we're seeing you're getting less of your state water allocation. This is a way to kind of reestablish more of that in a way. So it does have a value.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. And on that topic, I was just wondering if there was any updates on I know we've talked in a couple meetings in the past about trying to regionally sell our current allocation, if there's been any movement with that.
Yeah, I can take that question. So I've actually actively been looking for places to sell some of our state water. The market is very bad right now. And so the offers that I've received are $200 an acre foot, which feels a little bit insulting. San Luis Reservoir, so you might recall that there is storage allocated to both the state water contractors in San Luis Reservoir and the federal government. And the state water contractors portion of storage in San Luis Reservoir is pretty full. And there is a greater than 50% chance that water in San Luis could spill in December or January this year. So there's definitely a reason to look for, something to do with that water. But I at $200 an acre foot, I almost rather just try to keep the water in the bank because it has more value to us in San Luis
Yeah.
than it does.
Unless it spills.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. So in addition to carrying out the settlement agreement, CCWA has been doing a lot of coordination with the other state water contractors on different issues affecting the state water project. One of those is the Healthy Rivers and Landscapes Initiative. This is a broad-scale habitat plan that looks to balance the needs of endangered species within the Delta and water users, both agricultural and municipal, on the state water project. So that is a huge initiative. There's also significant subsidence issues that are affecting the ability to deliver water off the California aqueduct, and they are particularly a problem for the coastal branch, which is the branch that serves us here in the South Coast. And so there's a big effort to look at solutions for those subsidence issues. I have a feeling that's a topic that will come back to you with more information in the relative near future. They're still doing a lot of research right now. And then finally, there is a huge effort to go back and look at all of the books since the beginning of the state water contract and how people were billed and charged for their state water. And there were lots of mistakes made. And so there's basically this restructuring of all the payment structures, and that could have big implications for both CCWA and all the state water contractors. And that's another item that you may be hearing more about in the future, but I can't share much about right now. Another issue of concern that's been going on with the state water project is golden mussels have been found throughout the state water project. They first popped up in Northern California, but now they're all the way down in San Diego. And so there was a pretty big concern locally that the villagers, the smallest living part of a mussel or life form of a mussel, could potentially get into facilities that are connected with Lake Cachuma, and that would obviously be a really big concern. CCWA worked with the Department of Water Resources and did some really great research to look at filtration processes and chlorination that happens at the Colonial Pass treatment plant. And you can't say that there's zero chance, but there's a insignificant opportunity for those villagers to pass through the treatment process. It's very effective at treating for golden mussels, most importantly because we have to treat for things like cryptosporidium and E. coli, and they're much smaller than golden mussel villagers, so the treatment that we use for them is very effective for golden mussels. So there's been some interesting research done on that recently, but we feel pretty confident that golden mussels won't spread beyond Colonial Pass. And then they continue to do general maintenance and repair of CCWA facilities. Most recently, they did a big backwash pump replacement. So then moving on to our third and final agency, we'll talk about the Cachuma Conservation and Release Board, also known as CCRB. CCRB is another joint powers agency that was formed in January 1973, and their focus is protection of Cachuma project water rights. Currently members are the city, Goleta Water District, and Montecito Water District. Carpinteria Valley Water District used to be a member but is no longer. And so it's interesting because the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, on behalf of the Cachuma project member units, holds the water rights permits, but then CCRB is the agency that's responsible for the actions and decisions, kind of the unified response relative to the terms and conditions of those permits for the member agencies. And some of the things that they work on are issues related to downstream releases of water from Cachuma for the benefit of the protected steelhead or rainbow trout, and also any other water rights or water supply issues on the San Ynez River related to the Cachuma project. So a lot of what happens at CCRB happens in closed session because there's often anticipated litigation since we're talking about water rights. But some of the things that they've been working on in the last quarter include continued coordination with COMB. They work very closely. They meet, I believe it's twice a month, with reclamation staff regarding the federal consultation process with the National Marine Fisheries Service. And recently, the COMB board voted to make supporting reclamation's effort to complete the biological assessment, which is one step in the consultation process, a priority. So there's quite a bit of resources and effort that are going into that right now. There's been a lot of work navigating changes and reductions in staff because of the federal government early retirement offerings. And so the Fresno office, which is the office that we work with for the Cachuma project, has been like decimated, basically. So we're looking for opportunities where we can be supportive to them to make sure that everything works smoothly with our project. And they've been doing a bunch of work to monitor the compliance with stream flow requirements for the State Water Board order. And they work with COMB to work with reclamation on looking at the releases that are coming out of the outlet works downstream for fish. And then finally, last year, CCRB didn't need to utilize all of the funding that they had allocated in their budget for fiscal year 25, so we did get a refund for our fourth quarter billing. And that is the end of my update, unless anybody has any questions.
Do we have any public comment?
Chair Keller, we don't have any speakers for public comment on this item, and I should note that we did not have any public commenters for our consent calendar either.
Thank you.
Just wanted to make one observation, comment. You know, we turn on our tap and we got water out of it. It's not just the infrastructure itself, but there is so much other stuff going on all the time to make that as simple and straightforward and reliable as it is. It's quite remarkable.
Yeah. Okay, so next item is the groundwater basin storage and sustainable yield study. Looking forward to that.
So Chair Keller, as we get started here, just wanted to introduce this item. So we do have a lot of work yet to do, which is how does this roll into our water supply planning? But really excited. This has been a long time coming. We've been working with USGS, which has a different pace of working. And unfortunately, they couldn't be here today. They were supposed to participate, but unfortunately, since they're furloughed, they couldn't attend. But they did spend a lot of time, and we do think the product that we ended up with is really valuable. And I hope you enjoy the presentation today. Thanks.
Good morning, Chair Keller, Commissioners, and Councilmember Sneddon. My name is Jasmine Showers. I'm a Water Resources Analyst, and I will be presenting the Groundwater Basin Storage and Sustainable Yield Study today. For the presentation today, I'll start with a brief background and then a reminder of the 2018 study. And this 2024 study update has two main objectives. The first one is sustainable pumping, and the second one is maximum storage capacity. And then at the end, we have some discussion topics around groundwater management with sustainable yield. I'll start with the background in the 2018 study. I know that you're all familiar with this groundwater map. Just as a reminder, we have two main basins. Foothill Basin is in green on the map, and Santa Barbara is in blue. And then we have three main storage unit areas. Foothill, again, is in the green area, and Storage Unit 1 is located in the Santa Barbara Basin. The groundwater producing wells are symbolized in those blue triangles. And then for this presentation, I also added the monitoring wells. Those are in the white circles. And that just gives you an idea of the amount of data and the spread of our monitoring wells that USGS had access to. The first major groundwater study that the city of Santa Barbara did was in 1989. We call this the Freckleton Report. And this established the groundwater basin boundaries and estimated recharge. The next study by USGS was in 2018, and we call this the 2018 study, and then you can see the full title there at the bottom left of the screen. And during this study, USGS developed a three-dimensional groundwater flow and solute transport model, or SBFTM. And this study was really important. It improved the hydrogeological understanding of both basins. And on the right, I'm showing a screenshot from the 2018 study, and this is just meant as an example of some of the modeling that was done. This is showing the textural model of the basin, both vertically and laterally. The 2018 study modeled maximum groundwater drought storage, or the maximum water available to pump during a long-term drought. And sometimes you may have heard us refer to this as the drought yield over 10 years. The results are used in the annual water supply management report and the city's 2020 enhanced urban water management plan. On the right side of the screen, you can see the results of that study by basin. And then the total drought storage was estimated at over 24,000 acre feet. So why was an update needed when we had the 2018 study? The main reason is that the drought storage assumes maximum pumping, and it doesn't align with our city goals to minimize drawdown in Foothill Basin and then minimize seawater intrusion in Storage Unit 1. And in the model, when it maximizes pumping, it's acting kind of like a sponge. So it's filling up the sponge and then wringing it out with pumping over and over throughout the model run, so that creates more room for storage. And the 2020 Enhanced Urban Water Management Plan recognized this discrepancy between maximizing pumping and city goals, and they actually recommended a 10-year drought storage that is revised to equal our volume pumped during drought. So you can see that in the bottom right there, that's the 10,500 acre feet. So in addition to this first recommendation to revisit the 2018 study, the 2020 Enhanced Urban Water Management Plan recommended that the city consider developing a groundwater sustainability plan. And this is a GSP Light, and this is one of our discussion topics for later on in the presentation. And with that, I'll dive into the 2024 study update. So as I mentioned, the city has different management goals for Foothill and Storage Unit 1. And with that in mind, the basins were modeled separately for this update, which is different than the 2018 study. The objective 1 is to find sustainable yield by, which is defined as minimizing drawdown in Foothill and then minimizing seawater intrusion in Storage Unit 1. And to do this, USGS developed Excel-based dashboards for us, and that allows us as staff to model, to view modeled output based on those goals for each basin. And there were many assumptions in the model, so this is an overview of the most important assumptions. Precipitation records were the same for each model run, and those cover from 2004 to 2013. And those represent a typical period that includes some rainy and some dry years. There were 3 different basin conditions considered. There's empty, which is based on 1990 conditions, a recovered basin, which is based in 1998, and then recent, which is from 2013. And those were chosen because they're at the end of the calibrated model from the 2018 study. And then since these dashboards are based in Excel, they're limited to the amount of data they can hold. So the modeled pumping is limited to levels that will have little to no storage change. So it's not every available result. And this slide is showing the sustainable yield results for Foothill Basin. On the left, you can see that first column on the table are the initial conditions. And then the next columns are showing are all in acre feet over 10 years. And they're showing minimum pumping, maximum pumping, and mean pumping. And the mean 10-year pumping value for all three conditions is 5,270 acre feet. And you might notice that there isn't a huge change between initial conditions. And that indicates that Foothill Basin isn't very sensitive to initial water levels. And also of note is the city isn't the only pumper in the basin. There's also La Cumbra Mutual Water Company, which they're allowed to pump up to 300 acre feet per year. And they do usually average less than that. And so on the bottom, if I focus in on the recent conditions, the sustainable pumping yield for Foothill Basin is about 580 acre feet per year, and the city's share of that is 280 acre feet per year. And next, we'll look at the results for Storage Unit 1. Just a quick orientation of where we're focused on in the basin. This map is showing the production wells and the monitoring wells that are closest to the ocean. The production wells are in blue, and then the monitoring wells are in red. And the one we're most focused on is 23F4, and that is what we refer to as the Sentinel well. For Storage Unit 1, the results display steady pumping rate per year over 10 years. And then they show the max pumping rate that does not result in an increase in chlorides at the Sentinel well. And as you can see on the table on the right here, the results are very different between the initial conditions. For example, starting with an empty basin, the maximum pumping, sustainable pumping, would be 290 acre feet per year. And then starting with a more recovered or full basin, you can go up to 775 feet of pumping per year without increasing chloride conditions. And using recent conditions, the sustainable pumping yield for Storage Unit 1 is 700 acre feet per year. Yeah.
Thank you. Just a quick question.
Yeah.
How empty is empty? It can't be
a good-
fully empty, so it's,
Yeah, it's a good
do you remember?
question.
No? Okay. So good. Just it seems like, you wouldn't drought all the way down. But,
Yeah, so it's based on the 1990 conditions, which are real conditions in the model, and the basin was pretty pumped. Yeah, what would you say, Joshua? Pretty pumped.
Yeah.
Question for you.
Yes.
Is there some thought to how to optimize the storage capacity of the basins? In other words, if we have them completely full, but we've got a number of very wet years, we're losing the ability to capture some of that runoff. So is there's some play involved in this also, even
Exactly.
if we really don't need the groundwater, but we want to maximize the storage capacity of the basin?
Those are exactly some of the questions we had going into this, and we've got some slides here to show you how we kind of
Perfect.
honed in on that. Yes.
All right. And this is the official citation for these dashboards, and they will be publicly available. And this just shows a screenshot for now of what it would look like if you wanted to download these dashboards for yourself. Unfortunately, the link is not live yet due to the shutdown. For objective 2, we're going to start talking about storage. And the second objective was to determine the maximum storage capacity in acre feet for Foothill and Storage Unit 1. And to do this, USGS went back to the model, and they used the SB FTM to model storage change in each basin without pumping. And the approach for this is starting with those 1990 empty basin conditions, assuming 0 amounts of groundwater pumping, and USGS modeled groundwater change in storage over 10-year periods. And then they linked those model runs together until the change in storage flattened out or became insignificant. And that took 40 years or 4 10-year model runs. And just a note about the scope of modeling for storage capacity only. To go back to the sponge metaphor, this is acting in the model of just filling the sponge and figuring out the volume that the sponge can hold and never wringing it out to create more room. And storage is just one part of the groundwater basin inputs and outputs. It's symbolized in black on the hydrologic budget for storage unit 1. This is figure 14D from the 2018 study. And there's a lot going on there, so I just wanted to draw your attention to the black storage bars. And then in green would be the pumping, that light green color, symbolizing all of that pumping going out and creating more room in the basin. And this is showing the modeled storage capacity for both basins, which equals about 16,000 acre feet after 40 years. The largest increase in storage occur in the first 10 years of modeling. So you can see on the right, I'm showing foothill storage in dark blue, and then storage unit 1 is stacked on top of that in lighter blue. In the first 10 years, storage unit 1 shows 6,600 acre feet of storage, and foothill storage is 4,300 acre feet. At the end of the 40 years, total storage for storage unit 1 is 9,500 acre feet, and foothill storage is 6,400 acre feet.
So Commissioner Young, this gets to kind of your question here of, there is, at some point, we could sit and wait, but you're not getting as much benefit out of the basin by waiting. And that kind of helps us hone in on this sustainable yield question. There's like this optimum time where we should be taking water out of the basin, because sitting and waiting around isn't really gaining us a ton of extra storage as we sit there and wait. Yeah.
So where are we on this chart right now?
That is a good question. I have some current slides in the discussion, part of the presentation. This slide summarizes what we know about our groundwater basins from these two studies. So the table on the left is broken down by foothill and storage unit 1. And we know the drought storage, or that maximum pumping yield. And that again assumes maximum pumping. And then the middle column, now we know our sustainable pumping yield for each basin. And that aligns with long-term groundwater use. And then the final column is storage capacity. And that's the volume of water each basin can hold without pumping. And now we'll talk about some of the discussion topics. So here I'm showing the sustainable yield again, and the total amount is about 980 acre feet per year, and that represents about 9% of our current city potable annual water demand. And we know that groundwater is hyperlocal, and it could offset the use of more expensive or energy-intensive water sources. It looks like there's a question.
Yeah, quick question.
Yeah.
This would be, La Cumbre district would be separate from this. Yeah, so this is
Correct.
just the city? Yep.
Yeah, I took out the La Cumbra's 300 acre feet per year. Yeah, thank you. And also, we thought it would be pertinent to discuss the current basin status too and show that. So this is showing the current groundwater levels and pumping for Foothill Basin. And the squiggly lines are the water levels, and those correspond to the left-hand axis. And then on the bottom, green is non-city pumping, and red is city pumping, and those correspond to the right-hand axis. And one thing added for this presentation in the kind of golden color are the water level trends. And just to help visualize that, they are currently trending pre-2013 drought levels, about 2011 levels. And this is one of the things we're discussing, is what is a recovered basin? And then in storage unit 1, we are not worried about water levels. Those have completely recovered since the drought, and many wells are actually artesianing. So this is just showing the Sentinel well again, that 23F4 well. And it's showing the chloride levels in milligrams per liter from 1986 to our most current reading, which is from June. And chloride levels are trending down. Focusing in on the period of time with the lowest chloride levels is 1998 to 2014, and they averaged about 6,000 milligrams per liter. So we're getting very close to that average.
So I think kind of getting to the point you're talking about, I think we're a year or two out from kind of reaching that spot where you'd say that they are fully recovered, or what we would consider kind of I wouldn't say full. The full is not the right word to use, but I think return to some like safe operating space where we would want to consider starting to pull out the sustainable yield from the basins.
Yeah, I don't know how difficult it is, but it would be very interesting to see sort of that, like the cumulative volume, because the elevation is hard to like, I don't know how to translate that into like what percent of the, storage we're at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question.
I imagine with the model, one could figure that out, how much is, with the elevations,
Yeah.
what's the
Yeah.
total volume? Yeah.
Oh, Ms. Corey has something.
I think pertinent to this discussion is just looking at what data we have available to us as staff versus what the model inputs were. And the model actually doesn't look at elevation at all, but the data that we have as staff is elevation at our different monitoring wells. And so I think that there is an opportunity to look at trends like Ms. Showers has presented here to start to hone in to where that sweet spot, like Mr. Hagmark was talking about, is, but we don't have a direct correlation between that volume of water stored underground and the surface level elevations at our different monitoring wells. And so I think that's part of the puzzle that we're going to work to figure out with this new data.
And I think it kind of leads into that conversation of, for staff, I think trying to come up with some SOPs, standard operating procedures of here's when we kind of consider that threshold met, kind of working from both sides of elevations and what the model is giving us, and then correlating that with staffing resources to do this. Currently, we turn our pumps on about monthly to run them, take water samples, and then we shut them down. But to put them into full operation is a pretty big stretch for staff currently. And so trying to figure out how we're going to sustainably pull that water out with our staffing resources that we have. And so I think that's something that with the conversation today, we need to start kind of wrapping our head around. And our intent is to come back as part of the spring water supply planning update and have more of a conversation about where we landed with our resources to be able to start doing that and when we project maybe that would occur.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. That Joshua covered the second bullet very well here. The first bullet is concerning the second recommendation from the 2020 Enhanced Urban Water Management Plan, and that is to consider developing a groundwater sustainability plan. It would be very helpful to have guidelines for how to manage this basin, and it would be helpful to work with other pumpers in the basin to consider sustainably managing it now that we have more data. And with that, I'm on questions.
We were experimenting with injecting water into the basin, so where does that fit into this overall discussion? Would we benefit by injecting surface water into the basin during certain times?
I think that's what we have to explore. If we're taking out the sustainable yield, you wouldn't be pumping water into the basin. So I think that's another factor to kind of weigh in. Again, we found it to be viable to put water in the basin, particularly when you're trying to recover it. But the water does go into the basin really slowly. You get far more benefit from just natural recharge than putting it into the groundwater basin. But I think when we were, for example, 2023, when we just had an abundance of water, makes complete sense to try and the basins were on there still recovering, makes complete sense to try and tap into that resource and try and recover it quicker. But I would probably say the margins of how fast we're accelerating it, putting 200 gallons a minute in the ground is pretty slow.
And I think that would be an important part of the groundwater sustainability plan, to have guidance of when to inject, when to sustainably pump.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then what about the issue with, was it the regional board that was concerned about water quality impacts from injecting surface water into the basin? Where are we with that?
I'll take a stab, and if others have things to add, they can. So we completed that pilot and demonstrated that injecting treated drinking water does not have inverse impacts on the groundwater basin. So
To their satisfaction?
to their satisfaction.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make the comment that it's really cool to see this data. I know the study's been going on for a long time, and it seems like it's created some really valuable data, and it's really neat that it's going to be public, too. I look forward to seeing that when it comes online. And I think with the idea of creating a GSP light, it would be great to have some of that translation between the modeled volumes and the measured elevations. Maybe it's something some Bren students could help out with. And then I also had kind of a random question that's about recharge. When it was raining earlier this week, my husband was like, why can't we recharge all this groundwater that's, going down the street and flooding our streets? And I was just wondering, like, the potential around that, like, green infrastructure, stormwater capture, given the relatively, like, small nature of this basin. Like, is there much potential there or not really?
It depends on where it's happening. So one of the frustrating things that we found out when we did all the modeling is if water doesn't get in the ground above Oak Park, it really provides no benefit to drinking water. Not to say that there isn't a benefit to being able to slow down and or provide some treatment to stormwater, but it provides no drinking water benefit. Just because of how our storage unit 1 is shaped. Happy to get into more of that, but that is one of those things I get often and hear a lot about. So fortunately, most of the areas for infiltration are above Oak Park. We've got a lot of good spreading areas. You've got Mission Creek. You've got all these things that could get water under. But yeah, once it passes that, it
What
just
about
gets
even like residential parcels, that kind of thing?
Right, exactly. So there are not all parcels are the same, and I think it gets back to, like, if we were to incentivize it, folks that live up above Oak Park that would be more valuable for infiltration up there than somebody, for example, in the downtown area who was doing it. It just got into the shallow groundwater basin, which we aren't pumping out of. And
So below Oak Park, there's not really a drinking water benefit?
Great.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not a drinking water benefit, but it would be a benefit for, irrigation or for trees, and
Yep.
so
And
it has
flood
that benefit.
control,
And
of
so
course.
flood control is a little bit more complicated because you want to get, when there's a flood, you don't want too much water in the downtown area. So that's the balance, no? At that time, you really want to let water out. But yeah, I mean, it would do recharge for shallow groundwater, which would be very useful for trees and other.
Yeah. Thank you.
That is true, and a great point, because in a lot of the downtown area, especially down here, the water tables are probably like 6 feet down. The police station, for example, they've got a big old hole over there. The only reason that works right now is they have multiple wells that are dewatering several hundred gallons a minute to keep that construction site dry. But otherwise, the water table there, I want to say, is like 10 feet. Yeah.
Just a comment that this is just such phenomenal work, and it is transparent. You have it all here. It has input, and the sustainable yield was such a difficult topic to tackle, and I think in a lot of areas it's not so clear and transparent, and phenomenal work in having this and bringing this forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do want to add, when we do talk about the GSLA, we're going to basically be doing a cost-benefit analysis of that, because it was going to take a lot of staffing resources and time to probably get something like set up. There is an opportunity, hopefully, to get those pumpers, mainly La Cumbra, to participate in the costs of managing the basin, particularly if we do injection. But we got to go through that whole exercise to see, how much value we would get out of doing that, because it would be, I believe we'd end up having to set up a special board who would oversee the GSP. So there's an administrative function with that too. So really got to make sure the value is there when we go through that exercise. So anyway, we will be exploring that. And when we do have something, we'll bring back for further discussion. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, thank you again, and congratulations on this great study. So any public comment?
Chair Keller, we don't have any public comment for this item.
Okay, so our next item is construction manager at risk for the Vic Tracer Reservoir Replacement Project.
As my team gets set up here, I'll just kind of get this conversation started. So we're breaking a lot of norms here with this project. Obviously, one of our most significant reservoirs for the city. And so we want to give you a project update. We've been busy with the community, communicating with the community, meeting with the community on this project. Lots of things going on, so we'll give you an update on that. And then, of course, because this is the first project that is utilizing the construction manager at risk procurement model, we wanted to have further discussion here in a public forum with the commission. I think this is a great opportunity to educate as we go, and certainly if there's something we forgot to we didn't see, we want to make sure we incorporate that as we move forward in this new method here. So with that, I'll turn over to Mr. Ward.
Good morning, Chair Keller, Water Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to be here again and present on this topic. Like Mr. Hagmark said, we've been very busy on the design of this project and also very engaged with the community. And I also have today with me Miss Kelly Bork, who's going to also be doing the large portion of this presentation. So I will let her take over here after a few slides and just kind of background on this project. So we'll be covering the background, project updates. The bulk of the presentation will be focused on CMAR, project delivery and the contract and next steps. So as you know, Vic Trace is located in the Alta Mesa neighborhood. It's one of the largest parcels in that neighborhood, and that was on purpose, and we'll talk a little bit about that. It was built in 1956 and named after Vic Trace. Vic Trace is a huge figure in Santa Barbara's history, served as the water system superintendent at the time from 1900 to 1935, constructed a Gibraltar reservoir. So siting that reservoir was a major effort and was fundamental to Santa Barbara's growth and development. The reservoir serves as the hydraulic gradient for the entire water system, so we're fortunate that the majority of our water comes from gravity feed. And so this is a critical facility, and it currently stores 10 million gallons. It's the second largest reservoir. It serves 60,000 people in the city, so approximately 70% of the city is served from the site. And we've done a lot of diligence on what to do with this reservoir. We're currently at about 15% design. I don't want to steal too much of Ms. Bork's thunder, so I'm going to keep this moving.
Wait, who are the folks on the right?
Oh, sorry. Let me point that out.
Was that the Water Commission?
Yeah, not the original Water Commission, but Vic Trace, who you see on the left, he was appointed by the first Water Commission, and that's his family. On the right, you can kind of see him in the top there. There is a great history that we've provided and can provide publicly about Vic Trace. He's got quite the story. There's a lot of news articles and things like that written about him. Hence the name of the reservoir, really.
Right.
And it was this site that just the vision to create Gibraltar and know where all these assets were going to land also speaks to just the critical
Yeah, it was, for those who are interested, and we'll, if we haven't already, push it up to our project website, but the history of Vic Trace is really fascinating. He was here during a time when the city was really undergoing major growth. And it was, I'm trying to remember how much money they were bringing in. It was like $6,000 a year was when he started, and when he left, it was, I don't know, like $70,000 a year. It was over that 30 years, he grew their revenues. But Mission Tunnel, Sheffield Treatment Plant, Gibraltar, some of the major transmission mains, just quite a visionary for really creating reliability in the city's water system. And there's even an interesting article in there. At one point, the mayor wanted him arrested. And he's, I got too much work to do. I can't be arrested. And the police chief refused to arrest him. Like, it was wild stories. So, needless to say, things have calmed down, which is good in that sense. But anyway, I feel like when we went back and looked at this, I'm like, wow, this is awesome that they named this reservoir after him, and we will continue to name this reservoir after him. So, just an interesting time in our Santa Barbara history. So.
Mr. Chair, I really enjoyed reading all of that, and the idea of pushing it up onto the website. I think as a community context and history, I think it'd be worthwhile. It's a big project. It's going to get a lot of recognition once we go into construction. So I think that type of context is really, really interesting as well as very important. So thank you for what you've done.
And also, this project is the largest project that the city is going to embark on, and it's just one portion of the capital work that we're doing right now. Going back to the last presentation, the drought really consumed a lot of resources, a lot of staff time. We had to put a lot of new infrastructure in place, and so now we're really shifting our focus to catching up on the infrastructure that needs replacement. And as you'll see in the next slide, this reservoir is certainly due for replacement. We've been talking about it for a couple decades, and here we've arrived at 15% design. And as you can see by the pictures there, that the infrastructure is really ready. A lot of the stuff you see here has been replaced, but it's a bandage approach, but we're beyond bandage at this point. So one of the things that's a big focus of CMAR is to minimize costs. It's really to try to control costs, to make sure that we have a very dialed-in design, and that the construction considerations are brought to the forefront of the project while we're in design. It'll address seismic risk, ensure water quality, tighten site security, which has actually become a big item for this project as we've been talking with all the community members. They've really emphasized some of the trespassing that's occurred. And so site security is going to be a big one for this, and we'll be able to learn a lot through this project about the latest technology that's available. And we'll be able to capture stormwater on site better. That's important for sure. A lot of this stuff when it was built was back when the mesa was undeveloped. This reservoir was really built to serve Santa Barbara in that 1956 era when it had expanded rapidly, and then ultimately increase the resiliency of our water system. This serves as really a great complement to the storage at Cater and allows us to balance out the storage requirements throughout the system. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Bork.
Good morning, Water Commission. Nice to see you all, and happy to provide some project updates on Vic Trace today. So this is the project update portion of the presentation. What you're seeing here is our current design renderings. So we completed our 15% design, preliminary design back in February, and since then, our team has been doing a lot to solicit everyone's opinions and feedback and design criteria on our early design. So not only the public, but many, if not all, but not everyone, different departments at the city, police, fire, parks, IT. This site really touches a lot of operations at the city. And then also we presented these renderings to ABR, the Architectural Review Board, in June. So we'll also be incorporating their feedback. For community outreach, as a reminder, we completed our strategic communications plan and developed a project website last year. And since speaking with you all, I think in February or May, we did our preliminary design workshop at Monroe Elementary. That was really successful. Since then, I've also engaged with the Santa Barbara Neighborhood Association and presented to them. And then what we're most excited to share is we conducted our first neighborhood meet and greet about 2 weeks ago, and that's the picture you see on the right. We didn't have time to count, but we had probably over 30 different neighbors come by, dogs, and it was really fun, probably over hundreds of questions, and lots of feedback. So we had about 5 team members there, which I would say wasn't even enough because it was really well attended. It was great. Some of the major themes we're hearing about, beyond just wanting more information, would be fencing and security. How are we addressing each of the neighboring homeowners? There's 24 or so that back into our property. Will there be water service outages, public access to the site, noise, biodiversity, radio towers, and sort of a new one for us that we'll reach out to our risk team is how do we handle possible damage that happens during the project? During demolition, if someone suspects damage on their property, what does that process look like? So this is just, that's just a great example of something that was not on our radar and now is, now that we've met with the community. So go ahead, Joshua.
I was just going to add, it was, when we talk about, especially in the outreach world, like value in, value out for this was an interesting event. So of course we canvassed the neighborhood, we had signs and postcards went out. And then we set up a table at the entrance to the reservoir, and it was phenomenal how many people showed up. And I think it was like, was it a Wednesday or a Thursday?
Yeah, Wednesday.
Wednesday at 4:30, and people just kept coming. It was awesome. They were out walking their dog, or it was really great. It made for a lot of casual conversations. It allowed, I think, it felt really comfortable being in their space. So it was good. I definitely think we're going to do that again, just given the turnout we had. So yeah, kudos to the team for putting that together. That was great.
And then the next community outreach event that we're moving forward on is our the first public opportunity to participate in our CEQA process, which I will speak to on the next slide. So for the project's CEQA process, there's essentially 3 phases, or the way I see it, there's 3 phases, and we're currently in this first phase highlighted in yellow. Before you conduct an EIR, you essentially put out to the community what's called an initial study. So we take a look at all the different resources that might be impacted by the project and sort of do our best guess, sort of our studied guess as to will there be impacts to biology? Will there be impacts to archaeological resources? And so on. So we have that document, we send that out to the community, and we solicit community feedback. So the feedback at our December meeting, which will be this first public workshop for CEQA, is making sure we're in line with the community on what we're going to study for environmental impacts. And I will say it's kind of a misnomer. CEQA now includes many other things besides the environment. It speaks to wildfire, air quality, health risks. So we'll be looking at all those things, and we're hoping that will be in line with what the neighbors are looking for. And then after that, phases 2 and 3, we'll be distributing that draft EIR. That next phase will introduce the mitigations that we'll do during construction. And then ultimately a final EIR when we incorporate the next round of feedback, and then that will be presented to Planning Commission late next year.
So quick question. So you're looking at the draft release sometime in late spring, May?
Correct.
Okay.
And simultaneous to our CEQA process, we'll be doing the city's planning process. So similar to any private development in the city, we'll be following that same process. So this list here is all of the required boards and commissions that will be presenting different aspects of the project. Street Tree Advisory Committee and Parks, we'll be presenting our tree removals to them. HLC will be presenting our archaeological resources in those studies. ABR, as I mentioned, looking at the architecture of the project, and then Planning Commission specifically for the EIR. So here I'll just mention, typically we come to Water Commission for when we're, looking for approvals and recommendations for contracts. If Water Commission has feedback for major milestones in the project, you'd like us to come to you first before proceeding to some of these commissions, I would welcome that feedback. That concludes, the bulk of the project updates, and now we'll move into describing alternative project deliveries and the construction manager at risk method. In March of last year, the city's voters approved a measure to allow these alternative procurement methods for city projects, and that has since been incorporated into the city code. And what we mean by alternative project deliveries, those are just different ways we can award construction contracts for our construction projects. So before this vote, pretty much our only avenue was awarding these via low bid. So as long as a contractor met licensing and some qualifications, whoever had the lowest bid was awarded the work. Now we have, essentially these three bubbles I show here, a variety of different methods that I'll describe in a little bit, but we'll focus on the CMAR method. So best value has one we've been doing for the last couple months on several projects, the police station, Dwight Murphy Playground, Carrillo Gym, some other ones. And what that one does is it allows us to not only evaluate the cost, but to evaluate their proposals, so their qualifications, past experience on city projects, and so on. And that essentially becomes a dollar per point or a point per dollar evaluation. Design build is now a tool we can use more frequently. That one's pretty familiar by most people, very much used in the private sector, where you pick your contractor and your designer as a team at the beginning of the project. And then for CMAR, it's a little bit more nuanced and kind of a little bit more complicated, so happy to describe this in more detail. But essentially, you hire your designer, as usual. You progress enough in design that you kind of know the gist of your project, and then you can hire your contractor. They come in around 30 to 60%, and their role during the design phase is constructability review, and ultimately, should all go well, they construct the project. So I'll dive into more details there. So here on the slide is a brief list of the benefits and what you can leverage out of a CMAR method or a CMAR delivery. First and foremost, you get value engineering during design. So you have the contractor in the room providing that constructability review saying, if you do it this way, you could probably save $1 million. So we give the city that decision, right? Scheduling, strategic sequencing. Here is what's really important. The designer's usually not on the hook for outlining the schedule of how this project gets built. They're like, I don't want to specify scheduling. That's on the contractor. So sometimes you don't even have those conversations until much later. So having the CMAR on board, we can balance how to sequence all of the different components of this project with limiting disruption to the community. Risk review, that's an accounting of all the different risks that are happening on the project, so contingencies, and ultimately that leads to less change orders. Community involvement, the contractor's now part of the team, so they can attend these meet and greets, they can attend different community events. And then lastly, this guaranteed maximum price. So what this is at each stage of design, the contractor is going to give us a very transparent, probably thousands of rows of cost data saying this is how much, we'd essentially bid this project at. So we'll negotiate that and be reviewing that throughout the design, and then ultimately at the end of the design at 100%, they will give us this GMP, and so long as we agree to it, then we'll award the project.
Quick question there. Again, this is my first exposure to this kind of process. I've not really seen this before, and I'm assuming other agencies have, in terms of the larger construction projects. And the guaranteed maximum price, and again, I go back in all my years of watching big projects, change order after change order after change order. How guaranteed is that?
I asked the same question. So it will be less, but I will say as we get these cost accountings, these cost estimates, there is still the responsibility of the owner, our designer, to say, well, like, what is that number and how much risk is being built into that number, right? And it's not to say they're hiding it. It's just, it's hard to go through line by line everywhere. So the reduction in change orders is saying, hey, what is the risk here? Why is it so expensive? And then you talk about that, and you can park that over in like a risk registry. Like, for example, our oil well on site. They throw out a number saying, we think it's going to be 5 million because what if we find X, Y, Z? So we can set aside a discussion to really understand sort of best case, worst case, instead of that being a change order during construction. So we've kind of done our due diligence, and what's left, or at least what I understand, what change orders come up really and truly should be the unknown unknowns that were unknown to everyone. But it is going to be the responsibility of the project team to really suss out those possible change orders early.
Great, thank you.
And paying them to be part of the design team also is, they had opportunities along the whole ways to voice concerns about issues. And I think with the way the contract is drawn up, they have less room to say, oh, we didn't realize. No, you should have. Some of these, you should have foreseen that. That's a cost you're going to absorb. So I think a lot of good conversation back and forth that hopefully will put down some of those, because unfortunately the low bid always is, they usually here I'm going into it, if I'm going to get this contract, I'm going to have to fight to get to what it actually costs to do this project,
Chair Keller, Water Commissioners, one other note on this too is that we've been vetting the CMAR process as much as we can. It's a fairly new process for most public agencies out there, but we've really put our feelers out to every major water agency that has these sorts of capabilities. And we've also been getting a lot of references for legal support. So that way, as we go through this and we're developing this potential contract, that everything's very clear and vetted. So that's like an active conversation and dialogue with the contractors. So that way there's not these ambiguous terms that are baked into the contract.
Yeah, I think that's important. The comment did come up. This is very a path well traveled in the private sector, not in the public sector. There are not a lot of examples, as we've been looking for a legal team to help us with drafting up this contract, not a lot that have public experience doing these. So we are kind of leading on this one.
In terms of the bidding process, they're still bidding for the designer and for the contractor separately, I imagine, and evaluation of qualifications. So it has elements of the best value, as I imagine.
Yes, and the difference being, I guess, the sequencing of it. The designer's still hired on way at the beginning, and then in best value, you're still having the contractor come in at construction phase. And for us, we get to bring them on a little bit earlier, and they kind of act in a professional services role. And I'll speak to it later when I talk about, but there's also only a certain number of firms who are even familiar with this method. So I'll speak to that in a little bit. Here's another picture from our meet and greet. Why did we choose construction manager at risk for the VicTrace project? As we were working through design with Kennedy Jenks, we were already seeing the value in having the contractor at the table. So that constructability review will be great. We also, were delivered that $130 million cost estimate, so we saw value in having the contractor either reduce or add quality to that number. The schedule sequencing that I spoke to earlier, They'll also be giving us feedback on how we can mitigate construction impacts, which will be so wonderful because there's so much great tech and new measures that we can do to, reduce noise, reduce dust, that they all know, they live and breathe those mitigation efforts. And then lastly, having them involved with the community. And then during the construction phase, the key benefits to the CMAR will be, it's the same team, it's the familiar face, it's who you know to call. Built-in contingencies, which I spoke to, will sort of understand the uncertainty in that when we typically award that, 10% contingency, we'll know better what that 10% is going to account for. Mitigations are agreed upon, and then overall, we really hope to get to know these folks in first name basis, know their lifestyle, their hobbies, and really develop a rapport with them that'll hopefully ease construction issues when the stakes are really high. Once we decided to move forward with CMAR, we conducted an RFP process similar to when we hire for designers or consultants. That was conducted this summer. We received 4 proposals from 4 very large construction firms. We conducted interviews, in-person interviews with all 4, some follow-up interviews, did reference checks, and then also evaluated their proposals. And I will say here, all 4 were incredibly capable. There was no wrong choice. They were all just spectacular, and we learned so much, and it made the choice very difficult for us, but ultimately we chose Garney Pacific. Garney shown here. They're a leading water wastewater contractor, both nationwide, and they're looking to expand on the Central Coast. They're employee-owned. They are a leader and have done CMAR projects in the water wastewater space many, many, many times. Southern California-based team is who we're going to be working with, and they also spoke very well to their relationship with the union, understanding of our CWA, our Community Workforce Agreement, and that made our decision even easier. So as I mentioned, these pictures were given to us by Garney. They've done this project, this type of VicTrace project with the reservoirs, pump stations, pipelines, in sensitive communities time and time again. So we feel confident that they truly understand the same challenges that we've been bringing up. But I will, just as a reminder, should things not go well, the city always maintains an off-ramp where if we can't agree to that ultimate price, we can still bid out this work like any other project. So we always maintain that option. The project's timeline remains unchanged as of today. For the next year, we'll be focusing on CEQA and the planning application and continuing to have community feedback. In 2027, we'll focus on completing design, and we still anticipate constructing from 2028 to 2031. Our budget at the moment still remains unchanged. That number is still $131 million total. As we hopefully bring on the CMAR, we'll be really diving into this number in more detail. And we're still anticipating submitting for SRF funds, that low interest loan, in December of next year, and then possibly looking at other funding avenues and municipal bonds. That concludes the presentation. So our next step is to come back to Water Commission ultimately with that contract. As Matt mentioned, we're engaging with different legal firms to really firm that up. We don't want to sign something that has some ambiguity to it. And then secondly, we'll be reaching out to the community for that upcoming CEQA workshop that we're anticipating will be in early December. So thank you, and happy to answer any questions.
Question, coming out of COVID, we had a lot of inflation on materials, supplies, things of that nature. Have we seen that plateau, or are we still on a rise?
It's hard. We don't have a ton of data points because the last few years have been a wild ride. We've on average about 20% a year is what we've been seeing for construction costs. It does seem that we're getting more bidders now on projects, so it does seem like there's a growing hunger from the construction community to lock up work in the future, which has kind of stabilized costs a little bit. Again, hard to say conclusively. We don't have a lot of data points, but I think that's going to be something we're going to be watching closely. We are hoping, again, costs aren't going to go down, but we are looking for it hopefully to flatten out. Those costs that we provided up here are a projection out to 2029. Yeah, so those are what we anticipate. So those costs are based on some level of inflation. I don't know what those numbers are that we anticipated, but that's kind of the midpoint of construction.
Yeah, and how about the material costs? You know, I can see that the cost for services is kind of the contractors are interested in getting work. So that's like the labor end of things. What about materials, things we've had to import? Pipe,
Mr. Ward can speak. He's the one buying parts lately, but
So I think we're seeing some return to normal inflation so far. Now, part of the reason we want to use the CMAR process is to get more confirmation of that and then explore every way that we can lock in best pricing.
You know, a good example of that was we're talking about it is just tariffs, for example, and how to manage that. And unfortunately, in our contracts, low bid, they make an assumption and then they come back and change order you and say it's different from what we assumed. In this case, we can actually build that into our contract and make some assumptions about. So if inflation is not as bad, our expectation is that there might be some shared value back to the city. And if it's worse, we'll at least know what that baseline of what their materials estimate was based on. So it does give us a little bit, especially in these uncertain times with inflation.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, it's going to be a very interesting approach. We hope it works well. Thank you very much. Any public comment?
Chair Keller, we don't have any speakers for public comment on this item.
Great. Thank you very much. So we are on to our the director's report, sorry.
All right. Chair Keller, Commissioners, it's good to be back. Different role. I put in front of your chair, I put a draft of our org chart to kind of give you a sense of our new department. We're going to be spending the good part of this fiscal year kind of getting everything structured to be the Water Resources Department, but financially it won't go into place until July 1, 2026. But lots of things to work on. As you can see, we're playing around a little bit of our branding, and we'll be doing more in that space as well. But for the most part, as I've been telling staff, not much is going to change day to day from their work, but I do appreciate the opportunity to work more closely with council on items and the executive team. So hopefully kind of smooth out some of the challenges I've had in the past, having to kind of work through Public Works, who in its own right has a lot of issues going on. So yes, really excited about that. I want to recognize a few things related to promotions going on. We did fill our water services superintendent. Really excited about that. Robbie Days, as you may recall, he was our distribution superintendent. So he lateraled over, and then as of yesterday, we offered Corey Olson to be our water distribution superintendent after a lengthy recruitment there. So really excited to have those positions filled. Really critical to delivering work. And then I want to recognize, not necessarily in our team, but so integral to our team, that we now have a new city engineer, Ashley Sizo, who's here. And just want to point out, she's the first woman to serve as a city engineer in the city's 150 years of, yes, fantastic. And even more important, as our former water resources principal engineer, we've got a connection, we've got a leg up when it comes to getting services out of engineering. As you can see in the little map I have there too, it does outline some of our staffing vacancies that we're working on. I do feel like there was some significant improvements in compensation, in particular in distribution and collection. I think it has helped tremendously in our recruitments. We are getting, I think, our last recruitment for a collections operator. We got 240 applications. These are jobs that we were barely getting, 20 applications, if that. So big change there. In fact, we have to do a test to kind of whittle that list down, which is a good problem. So really excited. I think things are changing in the workforce, and hopefully we'll finally provide some benefit in our recruitment processes here. So November, just want to talk about, there's going to be a barge offshore showing up on Monday to work on the intake structure hardening project. So it's a very significant barge. We got some public outreach going out. I think it went out yesterday. I saw KSBY pick that up as well. So just wanted to loop you in on that. I wanted to talk about the general fund just a little bit. They're having some significant financial challenges and are undergoing a pretty exhaustive list of things that they can do to try and shore up their deficit. Right now, they're looking to try and reduce about $10 million a year in costs, and are looking at all different ideas, including new revenue sources and reducing expenditures. So they're going to be having several meetings. They kicked it off Tuesday at Finance Committee, and we'll be having another Finance Committee meeting on it. Not sure what our role is going to be in that. The enterprise is separate, but we've always been, anytime the general fund has been and had challenges, we've been able to at times absorb some of their staff in our vacancies. During the last recession, we picked up quite a few folks from Parks and Rec and others. I'm not sure how it'll play out here, but we're keeping a close eye on that and trying to figure out how we can be part of the solutions. Revenues and expenditures for water and wastewater continue to look pretty good. Water is projecting about a $1.2 million shortage. Again, it's really hard this early on in the year to kind of, but we'll continue to keep an eye on it. Although being a big number, it's a fairly small percentage of our overall revenue in water. But we'll keep an eye on that. I think, as you all pretty know, this winter will really be the telltale. If it is super wet, water sales will be really low, and that shortage will probably grow. And then finally, just want to talk a little bit about next month. We have the wastewater system annual report and a water conservation strategic plan update. So those are our two major admin items for next month. And with that, I am happy to talk about what's in the packet here. There's so much information in here, but just, I want to say this was really interesting. Chair Keller, in his new capacity, took our presentations and threw it into an AI model, and it did a fantastic job summarizing what are the meat of the presentations. So it's kind of a new tool, and I'm hoping as that technology goes along, our readers, viewers of our reports and presentation will have the opportunity to toggle back and forth if they want to get into the minutia and see what we have versus would you just like a summary? You're going through it really quickly and you want a summary of what's going on. So it was good. And one of the things that it pointed out is we didn't use a lot of water from Cachuma this year. And that was by design. We had water available in Gibraltar and we're able to kind of leverage that. But we did celebrate. October 1 was the new water year. And so this is kind of a summary of the full year here. And I wanted to point out just our city potable system total, which is just over 9,000 acre feet, which is really low. And so we'll have a full presentation on the water supply coming up. I think it's scheduled for December this year. And so we'll get into how did we end the year and then projecting out for the next year. So with that, I'll stop and open to any questions.
I just wanted to know, if you look at the Santa Barbara County rainfall report, we are currently at almost 500% of a normal year.
Yeah.
And 12% of our normal year's rain in just October 20-something. So it's crazy.
It's one of those screenshots you just want to keep.
It's just amazing how, with the little rain, 2 inches, we're already there. So.
would just like to take this opportunity, just so thrilled about the new organization and the new position, and congratulations. The city is going to be so well served and could not be more pleased. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that support.
Any other questions or comments?
I'll add, I liked the AI. I could tell it was AI font or bullet points, and it was a
Yeah,
really
yeah.
nice summary of
Yeah.
what was already
That
in
was-
here, so I
that-
liked it.
Takes 10 seconds. It's really amazing. Well, thank you very much. And so we'll be adjourning this meeting, and we'll be together again in November.
Okay.